Hi everyone, my name is Adisti Regar and I'm a PhD candidate from the University of South Australia. So this presentation is a case study of Our House, a recent digital performance by Q Theatre, which is a community-focused organization in Western Sydney, Australia. Our House was the 2021 iteration of the Originate workshop, where Q Theatre brings together early career artists to collaborate and develop a performance from the ground up under the guidance of an established theater director. I collaborated with Q Theatre on Our House as part of my research on transmedia theater, even though I also ended up in the paid role of digital artist. And I facilitated the show's transition to the digital realm when, like so many shows in the last 2 years, COVID restrictions changed things. First of all, I will contextualize the project and how the theater world adapted and pivoted to digital after COVID-19 hit. This can be roughly categorized, I believe, into these three forms. First, Zoom theater, perhaps the most common, is where the performance is mediated through Zoom or other similar platforms, but largely remains live as defined temporally, and even spatially in designated Zoom rooms, for example. The second is archival theater, where performances are recorded, in some cases from before the pandemic, maybe edited and made available to watch on streaming services like YouTube or Disney+. These lack the cotemporal liveness of Zoom theater and are more readily accessible, also more passive and immersive, like watching a film or TV show. Finally, some companies use transmedia storytelling to combine performances and digital media, most of them resembling digital versions of puzzle games, scavenger hunts, or escape rooms. Our house, which fell into the third category, went through a similar process. In June 2021, a week before the workshop was scheduled to start, the Delta strain lockdown hit Sydney and ended up lasting 4 months. This meant from the start to finish of Our House, nobody, not the artists or the audiences, could meet in person. The company actually gave the artists the choice to cancel or postpone to the following year, or move to digital, and somehow everyone agreed on the last option. Mind you, the director and 7, I think, of the 8 artists involved had no experience with shaping digital performance. Still, they thought they could use the show as an avenue in bringing together the socially distanced community of Western Sydney, and that became the core of their digital dramaturgy. So a few early key decisions were made, the first of which was the artist wanting to perform live. We'll discuss what that entails in a bit, with all the associated risks and excitement. At the same time, they were quite vocal in their dislike of Zoom's very opaque, very recognizable interface. I mean, even we were using it almost every day. And since no digital platform really can offer complete transparency, we opted for the hypermediacy option, where the interface serves a dramaturgical function. Since the theme was Our House, we thought about having an actual digital house with digital rooms. We considered several platforms that would allow this, like Mozilla Hubs, which with its VR function, and GatherTown, but the artists picked a third option, which was a tailor-made progressive web application with embedded YouTube live streams. So every page with a live stream would function as a different room. This made sense because the target audience would include a sizable portion of, say, non-digital natives. So navigating web pages and playing videos on YouTube would have a shorter learning curve. At the same time, because the form came out of logistical rather than creative considerations, at least at first, the dramaturgical process had to adapt to it rather than the other way around. For example, the artists wanted a cohesive story about one house, but they would have to perform from their own homes during lockdown. So they came up with a share house concept with multiple bedrooms. Interface design, digital illustrations were used to create this visually coherent story world, while lights and music created the illusion that they were in the same room for group scenes using split screens. Then the desire to bring the community together also led to the idea for a house party scenario where the audience became guests. with this digital immersive concept where they could roam different rooms and encounter different housemates. Finally, YouTube's live chat function allowed interaction among audiences and potentially artists, like in a party. Ultimately, there were changes and challenges along the way, especially since we were dealing with issues like Zoom fatigue and time constraints during lockdown. Concerns about audience confusion, for example, meant the free-to-roam scenes were ultimately made more linear and at the last minute. Interaction between audience and artists were scrapped because of lack of rehearsal time. Still, over the 2 nights of 45-minute performances, we had roughly 120 unique visitors who stayed for the whole duration of the shows, which is apparently a bit more than Originate seasons normally get. The visitors came from 13 cities across Australia and overseas, expanding the Q theater community. Most surprisingly, we anticipated maybe a dozen or 4 dozen comments on the live stream, but ended up with over 300. I'd like to show you recorded bits from one of the performances so you could get a feel for what the interaction was like.
I'm Nigel's best friend. Listen, speaking of Nigel, he's the birthday boy, but he hasn't shown. And the party's fallen into free fall. All of the housemates have pissed off to their rooms or outside. I really need you guys to help me find Nigel. I think he might be
So that's the split screen for the group scenes.
That'll be a good place to start. Let me know down below if you have any luck. Hey guys, thanks so much for coming to the party. I'm Pat, I'm Nigel's best friend. Listen, speaking of Nigel, Groove is in the heart. He hasn't shown, and the party's full in free fall. All of the housemates have pissed off to their rooms or outside. I really need you guys to help me find Nigel. I think he might be in range. If you want to arrange for him to come along, let me know down below.
So much better now.
So they could navigate between the different rooms on the web application. So aside from raw analytics numbers and like user submitted data, we also conducted audience surveys and focus groups for research purposes and received some insightful feedback. Most of our respondents said they did voluntarily explore different rooms. You know, they said they wanted more information on the story or the characters as their primary motivation. They commented on or at least followed the live chat, saying that they gained fun interaction and like the sense of belonging and community from it. On the other hand, some respondents said they weren't aware the show was live and could have been pre-recorded. Some wished they could interact with the characters on the chat, and most wanted more freedom to explore the house with more open rooms and characters to run into. The overall response is positive, though, particularly on the value of these kinds of digital offerings in pandemic times and even the future. The novel structure of the performance and its accessibility were noted as being huge positives moving forward. So in terms of the broader findings from our house, the first is that, like in other fields, the pandemic forced the theater world to confront their reservations about digital mediation and remediation. The concept of liveness was once again questioned, renegotiated, with Philip Oslander's notion of cotemporality maybe finally becoming the prominent definition over, say, Peggy Phelan's in-person co-presence. Still, in digitally mediated liveness, how can a production signal this cotemporality to the audience? Like, how does the audience know they're not seeing pre-recorded footage? Outside of a verbal announcement or a time-specific event, maybe interactivity through live chat, let's say. one that requires improvised response by the performers, can provide that sense of liveness. Our house also revealed the promise of dramaturgically driven performance platforms, where the UI and UX design of the platform, say web pages as rooms in a house, reinforces the dramaturgy of a share house, or a live chat function emphasizes the dramaturgy of a party. So rather than try to hide digital interaction and navigation, this design highlights it, enhancing story world immersion through hypermediacy. Other examples include the 2020 performance of What Do We Need to Talk About by Richard Nelson, where an instance of Zoom theater actually did facilitate the dramaturgy of a family Zoom call. Or prior to the pandemic, Blast Theory's Karen uses self-help quizzes, live coaching apps, and telehealth interactivity dramaturgically linked to the questions of digital honesty and consent. Finally, the last 2 years of digital performances show that they are not just artistic endeavors or storytelling, but also an experience for digital users. As such, the principles of UX design and HCI can and perhaps should be applied, including reframing the process of theater making as one of iterative design. Aside from story and character development, prototype building and usability testing can be highly beneficial and should be conducted in parallel to the traditional theater pre-production stage. Rather than being a hindrance to creativity, the design process can reveal solutions that place the users, both audience and artists, at the center. This, I think, is where the industry is moving towards, and I'm personally excited by the possibilities. That's it, and thank you for watching this presentation.